Halloween is meant for silly scares and little fun frights, but on this particular Halloween, Sacramento Kings fans are scared that what De'Aaron Fox is going through might not just be a bad stretch. Fox's struggles continue on the offensive end. The Kings as a whole struggle on the offensive end in their loss to the Dallas Mavericks on a Halloween matinee game. The good news is the Kings are still 3-3, so it's not the end of the world, but through these first 6 games, Fox is starting to get a little bit concerning. We'll talk about that. Plus, I'll share with you why I feel that Luka Doncic, and maybe this is sour grapes, I feel Luka Doncic is the least fun player to watch in all of the NBA, and it has to do with some whining and complaining that has become far too common. We'll talk about it on today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season and all off-season. If you're looking for in-depth analysis, game-by-game breakdowns, highlights, interviews with local and national experts, full coverage of your Sacramento Kings from January through December, this is the place for you, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And today's episode is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's an unofficial community center. A big thank you to our friends at McDonald's for always being there. I'm loving it. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I've been a Sacramento Sports media member, Sacramento Kings media member for the last 7 years. This is my 8th season covering the Kings, formerly with Sports 1140 KHTK Radio in Sacramento, now with ABC 10 Television. And before we go any further, happy Halloween, everybody. Hope you had a fun, festive holiday week or Halloween weekend. Hope you enjoyed your holiday. Hope you loaded up with plenty of candy, stayed safe. This was really our first, real Halloween, it feels like, since the COVID-19 pandemic started. It was the first Halloween for my son. He was 2 months old. We just used him as an excuse to go out and get candy for ourselves, basically. Is that using your child? I don't know, but it seemed like the right thing to do for me. Hell, I think we deserve it based off of the lack of sleep we have. So we got a bucket full of candy from just showing our son around, dressed him up in a little king outfit. You can see pictures of that if you care on my Twitter account at MattGeorgeSac, SAC. But like I said in the introduction, Halloween's supposed to be about fun little frights and getting scared, but not really scared, right? It's all scared in a fun way. What's happening with De'Aaron Fox has Kings fans scared and not in a fun way. He continues to struggle offensively, and the reality is, the Kings are fortunate to be 3-3. It's not a bad thing necessarily that the Kings are 3-3, but if De'Aaron Fox was playing at his expected level, not necessarily his absolute peak level that we saw last season when he was winning Western Conference Player of the Week awards, averaging 30, 40 points a game, not expecting that. But if De'Aaron was playing at where we expected him to be, that 27 points per game average, the Kings are probably 4-2, maybe 5-1, with a possibility of being 6-0 at this point. This was another game. We'll talk about the defense and the contribution from the bench, but this is another game where everything else was just enough for the Kings to be in it. And had De'Aaron Fox been there and delivered like the head of the snake he's supposed to be, this is probably a win. The Kings lost to the Dallas Mavericks 105-99. Just a 6-point gap between these two teams. Just a 6-point gap. De'Aaron Fox only providing 14 points in this game. Played just under 40 minutes, went 5 of 16. This is another game, third game in a row, where Fox has scored high teens, low 20s, or rather put up high teens and low 20s in field goal attempts and made single digits of them. Made less than 10, this time 5 of 16. Made his first three-pointer, the rest couldn't find one. 1 of 4 from three-point range, only got to the line 5 times, went 3 of 5 there. Did do other things, contributed in other ways, even though the scoring wasn't there, with 8 rebounds, 4 assists, turned the ball over 3 times, which hasn't been as high as other games, but still too high for your primary ball handler or one of your primary ball handlers and your star. But a minus 15 is not good. Minus 15, I'm not a huge fan of the plus minus stat, but when you have the lowest plus minus on your team, It's usually not a good thing, especially when you have the lowest plus minus out of all your starters, and there's only one other starter with a minus plus minus, which is surprising based off of how this game went, especially how this game started. Again, we're going to get into other stuff outside of De'Aaron Fox a little bit later on. But I talked about Fox's struggles last week on an earlier episode of the Locked On Kings podcast, and I shared with you why I wasn't concerned yet. And to be honest with you, to some extent, I'm still not overly concerned because I truly believe De'Aaron Fox is going to be able to work his way out of this. Like I have more faith in the Fox that I've seen over the last 4 or 5 years than I have in these 4 or 5 games of struggles. Like it's important to keep that in mind. But I'll tell you where I am concerned when it comes to De'Aaron Fox, and it's not current. It's actually future-based, because we've heard it time and time again from Luke Walton, from these Kings. You've heard it from me. De'Aaron Fox is the head of the snake. De'Aaron Fox is going to take this team as far as they can possibly go. And what we're seeing right now is even with De'Aaron Fox struggling, this Kings team still can hover around being average, around being 500. If De'Aaron Fox struggles like this for the remainder of the season, the Kings still can be in the play-in picture. Now, actually making the playoffs, I don't know if they're going to do that. But it goes beyond this season, because the Kings making the playoffs this year through the play-in, or however they make it in, only to be a first-round exit. We know the Kings aren't going beyond the first round. That's not the end game. That's the goal for this season, maybe. That's a goal for someone like me and fans who want to see the Kings climb each rung of the ladder. Don't want to see them, we would love to see them skip a few rungs, but that's not going to happen where the Kings just jump into the playoffs and are all of a sudden a deep playoff team. But you don't, your end goal isn't just, okay, make the playoffs and then that's it. It's been a success. No, the goal for this Kings team ultimately is to be a Western Conference champion and an NBA champion. Now that's, like I said, multiple rungs up the ladder from where the Kings are right now. It's certainly not the expectation this year. But if you're going to pay De'Aaron Fox a max contract, if you're going to call De'Aaron Fox the head of your snake, that means you believe that De'Aaron Fox can be the leader of your team at championship status. And I think all of us believe, based off of how we saw last season, that De'Aaron can be that for the Kings. Now, we haven't seen him play in a play-in or actual playoff game where guys really step up. Perfect example is John Morant last season, right? John Morant stepped up in a major way during the play-in and during that first round of the playoffs against the Utah Jazz. And look how he's playing right now with the Memphis Grizzlies. He's playing out of his mind. I had a conversation with Sean Coleman, Locked On Grizzlies, during the offseason debating who's better between Fox and Morant. I said I'd pick Fox. He said he'd pick Morant. Most people were on Morant's side there, but Fox had a whole hell of a lot better of an argument than he has right now. 99% of people would pick Morant over Fox right now. And if you're in that 1%, I think it's more of a homer pick than anything else. Like, I still want to pick Fox out of pride for my own argument, but Fox isn't better than John Morant right now. John Morant is showing that he can do it. He can be the leader. He can put the team on his back. Now, is that sustainable, what Morant is doing for an entire season? No, but he's doing it right now when his team needs it. And while the Sacramento Kings need more from De'Aaron Fox, he hasn't been able to provide it offensively. I'm concerned that what we're seeing from De'Aaron Fox right now is that when he's playing with this team theoretically at their best, specifically when he's playing alongside guys like Tyrese Halliburton and Davion Mitchell, Fox isn't able to be as efficient as when he was the guy and had to put everything on his back. Now, it's a better problem for Fox to figure out, I guess, how to play with good players versus how the hell do I figure out how to score 30, 40 points a night just to give my team a chance? That's a better problem to have, and that's why I think over the course of the season, he will figure that problem out. But as of right now, absolutely that's concerning, because De'Aaron Fox looks nothing like a star max player guard that can not only lead this team to the playoffs, can lead this team to a championship one day. Not even remotely close. Not even remotely close. And there were already people questioning whether or not he could be the number one guy on a championship team. Again, not wanting to skip too many rungs up the ladder, but this is the end goal. This is what you have to pay attention to. This is what you have to decide. Dave Deuce Mason pointed out something very, very interesting. De'Aaron Fox had 12 games last season with fewer than 20 points. The Kings were 2-10 in those games. This season already, the Kings are 1-3 in the 4 games that he scored less than 20 points. So even with how this team is playing better, even with the team being 3-3 at this point, even with Tyrese now in the starting lineup, Davion Mitchell playing great defense off the bench, the Kings bench being significantly better, Buddy Hield playing well, the Kings are still 1-3 when De'Aaron Fox scores less than 20 points. 4 out of 6 games, Fox has scored less than 20. We expect his average to be around 26, 27 for the Kings to have a real legitimate shot at making the playoffs. I guarantee you right now, the Kings make the play-in right now. Let's say tomorrow's the play-in game. They probably have a chance to win it, but they're probably losing it because De'Aaron Fox is playing the way he is. The Kings are only going to go as far as De'Aaron Fox takes him. So am I concerned overall about the play of De'Aaron Fox? Am I concerned that he's not the guy that we think he is? Am I concerned that the Kings paid him too much money? No, I'm not. Yet. I'm not. Truly. And I'm not just saying that for the sake of the argument, and not just saying that because I'm hosting a Kings podcast. I'm truly not just saying that. I'm not at that level yet. But those Halloween fears, those spooks, starting to creep in a little bit. Looking towards the long-term and short-term future and starting to wonder if Fox is truly going to be a part of that. Just starting to have those thoughts. Never had those thoughts before. But now what we're seeing, those thoughts are just starting to creep their ugly little head. I think Fox is going to be fine. Luke Walton said after the game, he believes De'Aaron Fox is going to be just fine and he's not panicking over 6 games. And I think Kings fans deserve to give Fox more of the benefit of the doubt just based off of how he's performed for the Kings over his career to this point. But it's definitely disappointing. Definitely disappointing to see him get off to this start. Unfortunately, the Kings lost. They're 3-3, like I said. But this game could have been a lot more ugly than it was. I know we don't want to hear about moral victories. I'm not going to preach moral victories to you. I'll tell you about the story of this game, how the bench was extremely impactful, saving the Kings from embarrassment early on against this Dallas Mavericks team. We will get to that. Before that, though, want to let you know today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast, like I already mentioned, is brought to you by our friends over at McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's a place where family and friends can come to just simply reconnect, a place where classmates can meet up for a study group, knowing that they'll have dependable Wi-Fi and an endless supply of French fries and McFlurries. McFlurries are my favorite, by the way. McFlurries were my pregnancy craving. Yes, dads, men can get pregnancy cravings during that 9-month period. I had Oreo and M&M McFlurries almost on a nightly basis. Win or lose, it's a place, McDonald's, where teammates, competitors, the home team or the away team can come for a post-game recharge meal. It's also the place that you always look forward to stopping by after a long road trip, when you need a short rest, in the morning when you're in a hurry to grab your cup of coffee or your breakfast. McDonald's provides that all for you. Head to your local McDonald's, refuel, and reconnect today. And hey, maybe we might do a Locked On Kings road game watch party at a McDonald's at some point in the future. It could happen. McDonald's, I'm loving it. Locked On Kings is also brought to you by Calm. This is a LeBron James endorsed product. And you might have seen YouTube ads with Calm, TV ads with Calm and LeBron James. What makes LeBron James King James is sleep. Sleep is LeBron's superpower, and Calm is the #1 app for sleep meditation. They've teamed up with LeBron James to help you achieve the true power of sleep. When it comes to athletes, we tend to focus on physical fitness, but there's another side of each game that's just as important, the mental fitness. Calm is the #1 app for sleep and for meditation. They've teamed up with LeBron James to help you train your mind and become the champion version of yourself. LeBron and Calm know that your mind is like any other muscle in your body, and you don't have to be a world champion to learn how to train it. We all have superpower brains. Calm can can train your brain so you sleep better, reduce your stress, and perform at your best, just like LeBron James does. For LeBron, sleep is a critical part of his mental fitness routine. So if you head to calm.com/LockedOnNBA for a a limited time, you'll get 40% off a Calm premium subscription. With Calm, you have access to the nature scenes LeBron loves, like Rain on Leaves, it's one of his favorite, and so much more. Sleep stories, meditations, so you can be ready for any challenge that life throws your way. Again, for a limited time, our listeners can join LeBron in using Calm and get a 40% discount on a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/LockedOnNBA. Unlock content to help you focus, ease stress, and sleep better. Get started at calm.com/LockedOnNBA. So as scared, spooked, worried we are about the play of De'Aaron Fox and another poor offensive performance from him, as a whole, it was another poor offensive performance for the Sacramento Kings. Anytime the Kings score less than 100 points, something went wrong. And really what went wrong for the Sacramento Kings in this game was their three-point shot. They took 36 threes, pretty common for them, made just 7 of them. A lot of Kings struggling, not just from the perimeter, but struggling, period. A lot of guys that have been super dependable so far this season, like Harrison Barnes, for example. Barnes had his first down-to-earth game where he shot 5 of 16, scored just 15 points. And I say just, that's probably around what his average is going to be and what his average has been, but that's low compared to what he's done this season. It's unfortunate that he did that against his former team in the Dallas Mavericks, who didn't necessarily know how to use him in his 2.5 seasons that he was there. He did finish with a double-double, though, 10 rebounds, also had 5 assists, 3 steals, so he was very effective in other ways, played 38 minutes. Mo Harkless, don't expect much offensively out of him, but you're hoping for more than 2 points. He scored 2 points, period, in the last 2 games combined, so you need a little more offense from him. Rashawn Holmes was very, very good. No surprise, he's the Kings' leading scorer, the best scorer, best player in that starting lineup by far. 22 points on 9 of 15 shooting. Went 1 of 1 from three-point range, so he continues to shoot well. Also 13 rebounds, another good double-double for him. A couple of steals too. Tyrese Halliburton just 14 points. As concerned as we are maybe about the play of De'Aaron Fox offensively, we expect more from Fox points-wise than we do Tyrese Halliburton, but Hallie hasn't been putting up too many points himself so far this season, so that's a number that you can be concerned about for sure. And then off the bench, I thought Tristan Thompson had a great game. Buddy Hield, just 11 points, 4 of 13 shooting, 3 of 12 from three-point range. He faced different coverage. As a whole, offensively, this game was a big letdown for the Sacramento Kings team. They played their starters a lot of minutes in this game, even though 4 out of the 5 starters were pulled within the first 4 to 5 minutes of this game, because the Kings were blitzed coming out of the gate. And it was predictable. And I don't know if the Kings didn't expect it, or maybe they did expect it but couldn't do anything about it. The Dallas Mavericks were coming off of an embarrassing loss to the New York Knicks. Something like they gave up 115 points or something like that and scored just 70 of their own. I'm actually going to look it up because I forget the final score, but they were just destroyed by the Denver Nuggets, 106-75. So they lost by over 30 points in that game. So you knew, regardless of who they were playing, but especially with a team like the Sacramento Kings at home that they know is beatable, like you knew they were going to come out and want to prove a point. They were playing for pride at that point. You could see how they started this game. They were hitting their shots. There's been a team that has struggled coming into this game. They were the worst offensive team in the first quarter, averaging only around like 20 points per game in the first quarter. 3-point wise, they've been struggling all season long, but they got going from 3-point range in this game. 3-point percentage came down to earth, especially in the second half. But in the first quarter, they were hitting everything that they put up. They finished 12 of 37 at 32% for the game. No surprise that Luka Doncic led the game in scoring and led the team in scoring with 23 points, 10 of 21 shooting. He wasn't phenomenal, but he got the team going both as a scorer and a facilitator early on. Also had 10 assists, 8 rebounds, flirting with another double-double. But everybody from Tim Hardaway Jr., Dwight Powell, Finney-Smith, like they did a very good job out of the gate. Stretching the floor. The Kings' rotations look a bit slow. Offensively, the Kings looked a step slow. They were completely being outplayed in the first quarter until Luke Walton basically made a hockey substitution. He left Harrison Barnes in the game and put in 4 bench players. It was like Tristan Thompson, Terrence Davis, Davion Mitchell, and Buddy Hield all came into the game. And credit to the bench. credit to the bench. They turned what was a 15-point deficit. They got it to as low as like 6 or 7. I think by the end of the quarter, they were trailing by 9. Yeah, 31-22 by the end of the first quarter. But things could have gotten really out of hand and really ugly quickly had it not been for the bench coming in, outperforming the starters, and giving the Kings a little bit of life so that they could go into the second quarter with a chance to catch up. And in the end, the Kings outscored the Mavericks 22-25 in the second quarter to where it was reasonable at halftime. The Kings only down, 6 points at half, and they would be within that, had a chance to actually did take the lead at one point in the third quarter. But I mean, you look at the Kings numbers per quarter, they didn't score more than 30 in a single quarter. That can't happen. Defensively, they held the Mavericks to just one 30-point quarter, which was the first quarter, 31. Other than that, 22 in the second, 29 in the third, 23 in the fourth. Another good example of the Kings defense being good enough for the Kings to be in a position to win this game. And yeah, that's a low bar. It really, truly is a low bar. Like, oh, the Kings defense was good enough for the Kings to have a chance to win. But think about how a game like this would have gone last season. Number one, the Kings did not have the depth that they have this season to be able to bail their starters out when they get off to a slow, terrible start. And I will say probably an early start, a 12:30 tip, had something to do with the Kings looking a bit tired and slow and lethargic. That's not an excuse, though. You knew you were going to be playing that early. Get up and get ready to play. Be more mentally prepared. I know a lot of people want to put that on Luke Walton. I do understand to some extent, but I also put that on the players as well for not being ready to go and actually executing early on when they knew the Dallas Mavericks were going to come out of the gate swinging. So blame really goes on both sides there. But looking at this game as a whole, offensively, Kings not nearly good enough, of course. Defensively, though, they did enough to have a chance to win this game. Last season, with the bench and with the defense, Kings never would have had a chance to win this game. The fact that they did come back, actually take the lead at one point in the second half is pretty astounding. Then the Mavericks did get it back to a double-digit lead. I think they led, 10 points heading into the fourth quarter, and the Kings just couldn't close that gap with how inconsistent their offense was and how their top guys like Fox and Halliburton continue to struggle. Again, if the Kings have more out of those two, specifically have more out of De'Aaron Fox, especially in winning time, this Kings team is probably 4-2 at worst. I think this Kings team is honestly 5-1. I'm not going to say 6-0 because that's a little bit extreme. I think this Kings team, if De'Aaron Fox is playing at the level that we know he can play at in winning time, I think this Kings team is 5-1 at this point. So I can say it's a positive, and I could spin it, I guess, as a positive, that even when Fox isn't at that level, the Kings are 3-3. But that still feels like such a low freaking bar. Such a low bar. And the bar really is that low for this Kings team. The fact that I could say that the fact that they're at 500 with Fox struggling is cause for celebration. It's really not. Because right now, early in the season is when you want to jump on teams like Dallas, like Phoenix, who have playoff expectations, who aren't in regular season form yet. This is when they're extremely beatable. And the Kings have had 3 extremely winnable games that they have dropped at this point early in the season. Good news is they haven't been blown out. Hooray. I don't think that's really worth celebrating. More unforced turnovers for the Kings in this game. They turned the ball over 13 times, gave up 20 points off of those 13 turnovers. That's been the difference in every single loss for the Kings, is the amount of points their opponents have scored off of turnovers. But we do have to give credit to the Kings bench that showed up and did what the Kings lacked all last season, getting the Kings back into this game. But coming up next, before we wrap up the podcast, it's sour grapes to some extent. And I know many of you are probably going to roll your eyes at this. I know some Dallas Mavericks fans are going to be listening to this podcast, and you might turn it off even before I get to this segment. Luka Doncic, to me, is one of the least fun, if not the least fun player to watch in the NBA. That used to be James Harden for me. Now with the foul rules, the changes to the foul rules, and Harden not being able to just cheese his way to the line 97 times a game, it's easier to watch Harden's game and appreciate what Harden can do outside of that. He's been nerfed a little bit. If you're a video game person, you understand that term. Luka Doncic is just tough for me to watch, to the point where I just get frustrated and angry, and it has nothing to do with the fact that the Kings passed on him for a guy who can't get off the bench right now in Marvin Bagley. I'll talk more about that here coming up in just a little bit. Right now, though, I want to let you know today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast brought to you by our friends at Built Bar, the best tasting protein bars on the planet. Built Bars are so good. They taste like candy bars. I wouldn't be mad at all if Built Bars were placed in my son's jack-o'-lantern. Not many people understand both the great taste and the health, or how healthy a Built Bar is yet. A lot of people don't understand. If they did, we'd see them more commonly around situations like Halloween. And before you'd say, oh man, I'd be disappointed getting a protein bar in my jack-o'-lantern if I was trick-or-treating. Trust me, these bars are delicious. They really are healthy candy bars covered in 100% chocolate, a bunch of different flavors like raspberry, mint brownie, double chocolate, salted caramel, strawberry. They have a new one that's cookie dough, cookies and cream, German chocolate, so many different flavors. All delicious and healthy for you. 17 to 18 grams of protein, calories ranging from 130 to 180, 4 to 5 grams of sugar, 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. And look, if you didn't get one in your jack-o'-lantern, you can get a box for a very reasonable price on Built.com. I recommend if it's your first box, order a mixed box. They'll send you a bunch of different flavors for you to try out. Then when you go back to order your second box, because I'd put money on the fact that you will, you'll get the opportunity to pick the flavors that you like and build your own box. That's what my wife and I do. When you order your box, whether it's your first, second, third, no matter, at Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Say what you want. Call it sour grapes. Call it not being over the 2018 draft. I don't care. Because I truly know that I am over that part of things. I've been over that really for the last year and a half watching Luka Doncic play. I'm able to watch Doncic play and take out all context of could have had him. I'm not able to do that with Damian Lillard yet, but I'm able to do that with Luka Doncic at this point. That's where I am. You can believe that or you don't have to. It's truly up to you, but I know that's where I'm at watching Luka Doncic play. And now I've gotten to the point where I'm just exhausted by him playing. And it's not what he does as a player. It's not his shooting, his scoring, his passing. Like, that is all fun to watch. I'm mesmerized by that. It's the constant whining, bitching, complaining, almost every possession. If you just watch this man, if you're watching on TV, just pay attention to him. So many times the cameras will just catch him during a dead ball talking to the official, but watch the amount of times during live freaking action that this man turns to complain. There was a moment in the second quarter where Luka was being guarded by Davion Mitchell, and Davion did a great job, ended up... I can't remember if he knocked the ball away or just contested a shot, stripped the ball away from Luka. It was something like that, where Luka went for this kind of flail, like, send me the line, I was fouled. And no, it wasn't a takeaway because the Mavericks still ended up having possession of the ball. So Davion has a good defensive stomp on Luka. Luka can't get to where he wants to go, can't get the shot up that he wants. Mavericks still have possession of the ball. Shot clock is still running. Luka completely quits on the rest of the play, turns around, and is gesturing and pouting to the official right in front of him while his team is still trying to score. That, to me, would, as a teammate, as a coach, that would drive me nuts. Luka Doncic, from an NBA standpoint, is completely entitled with how he talks to the referees and how the officials treat him. He gets away with so much bitching, so much complaining. I see it all the time when he plays the Kings, so much so that a couple of years ago, Luke Walton actually yelled at the refs at one point, telling them to ask Luka for his autograph after the game since they're such big fans of his. Like, Luka complains constantly for someone who gets calls all the time in his favor. And I'm really not trying to turn this into a bag on Luka Doncic to make myself or make Kings fans feel better after a Kings loss. That I'm able to separate the two. The Kings lost. Luka was solid as a player in this game. He was the main reason why the Kings lost this game. Not taking that away. The Dallas Mavericks are 4-2. They were without Kristaps Porzingis. Luka Doncic is a damn good player. He's an MVP candidate for sure. But all that other crap, all that other whining, moaning, and complaining that Luka does, it's so tired. It's so tired. It's annoying. It's obnoxious. It's just, I don't know how Dallas Mavericks fans can just be okay with it. In fact, I've heard Nick Angstead and Isaac Harris of Locked On Mavericks, they haven't condemned it nearly as much as I and others have, and why would they? But they have talked about it, and I know they've been a bit annoyed by it from time to time. It's the number one criticism of Luka Doncic. It's just a constant bitching, moaning, and complaining. I can't stand it. I absolutely can't stand it. So I don't look forward to watching Luka play because I know I'm not going to be able to ignore that part. And it drives me crazy, especially with the years of DeMarcus Cousins here in Sacramento, where DeMarcus would do a lot of the same thing and not receive nearly the preferential treatment that Luka Doncic receives. The leash that Doncic has is very similar to the leash that Draymond Green has, where when the Kings played the Warriors in Sacramento a couple weeks ago, Draymond Green could scream and throw his hands up and yell at the officials every single possession, but as soon as Rashawn Holmes did it once, Rashawn got the technical foul. It's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's tired. It's stupid. And I'm exhausted about it. Again, call it sour grapes if you want. Whatever. I don't like it when it comes to watching Luka play. Terrence Davis had another poor game off of the bench. Only played 8 minutes, 40 seconds. It was clear that he was trying to force things. The one bucket that he did score, he did well to put the ball on the floor and attack the basket, but once again, from beyond the arc. I mean, he only took 3 shots in this game, but Terrence Davis has not been good, period. I think he's shooting under like 16% or something like that from three-point range this season. He has been horrible after being the best scorer for the Kings during preseason. The Kings would love to have him get going, but on a future Locked On Kings podcast, I'm going to spend most of a podcast on this, maybe on a non-game day. Should the Kings consider replacing Terrence Davis in the rotation with Marvin Bagley? Two very different players. One's a guard, 2-3. Bagley's more of a 4-5. And Tristan Thompson, I thought, played very, very well. Had easily his best game as a King coming off the bench. Scored 13 points in 21 and a half minutes. So I don't know how the dynamic between Bagley and Thompson or Bagley and Len would work off the bench, but Terrence Davis is giving them nothing, and we know at least Bagley can give them numbers, if nothing else. At what point should Luke Walton consider it? Are you at that point? Let me know, and we're going to talk about that more in the future. You can tell me on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. If you're watching on YouTube, leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. Now the Kings look forward to a meeting with the Jazz on Tuesday. They played the Jazz very, very well in Sacramento. Arguably should have won that game in Sacramento. The Jazz now know what to expect, and I highly doubt they're going to be without Joe Ingles for a suspension in that game. The Kings are going to need every bit of good De'Aaron Fox if they want a chance to win this game. I expect them to lose. I expect this team to dip back under 500 at 3-4. But after that, some winnable games. The New Orleans Pelicans at home, the Charlotte Hornets at home. You have the Indiana Pacers, the Suns, the Spurs. I think after that stretch, the Kings are likely 6-6, 7-5 is possible. 5-7 is also very possible as well. So the Kings have some tough matchups coming up, but also some very winnable games that they need to take advantage of. They need to beat the Pelicans. They do need to beat the Pelicans. They need to beat the San Antonio Spurs. That should be 2 more wins, basically guaranteed, but that's always hard to say with this Kings team. As for the Hornets and the Pacers, 2 Eastern Conference teams, 2 solid teams. Those might be a little more difficult. The Suns and the Jazz. You've beaten one of those 2 teams, nearly beat the second, but those 2 are going to be looking for revenge in their own way a little bit. So those are 2 more than likely losses. That's how I look at it. But let me know where you're at here on this Halloween, especially when it comes to De'Aaron Fox. Are you concerned? Are you at that point yet? Are you just like me, kind of spooked and scared here on this Halloween? Let me know, again, on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your comments down in the comment section down below on YouTube. I hope you had a fantastic holiday. I hope you had a great weekend. Thank you for joining me for this Locked On Kings podcast. Sorry it came out a little bit later. You know, Halloween festivities and all that. I have a big bucket of candy to eat because my son's not old enough to eat it yet. So I'm definitely going to take advantage and snatch all that up before my wife does. Make sure you get yourself a Built Bar. Go and get a nice McFlurry from McDonald's. And look at Calm. Invest in Calm, especially if you're having trouble sleeping. LeBron James uses it. It works for him. It works for me. I think it'll work for you too. Thank you to all our great sponsors. Thank you to your support, as always, for listening to the Locked On Kings podcast. Can't wait to have you join me for the next one. I think we have 4 games this week, if I'm not mistaken. So 4 post-game pods coming this week, and probably a 5th pod where we will focus and talk about Terrence Davis being out of the rotation, Marvin Bagley being in. Been a while since I've had a guest on, so I'm going to try and do that too in the near future. So a lot of great content still coming to the Locked On Kings podcast. I hope you will continue to join me. Until next time, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.